Hello everyone, we're back with another SketchUp tutorial. This is a request coming from Alexander Raskovic. Great video, Adam. Can you tell me how you drew the targets, metals, barrels, and walls, or did you somehow import them into SketchUp? That's a very good question. Both. I've imported some of these, however, I've learned to make some of the props myself. And today we're going to cover how to make a wall section, and if we have time we might jump into something else after that. First thing we're going to do when we make our wall is we're going to want something to use as a template. I happen to have a drawing made up, and we're going to use those dimensions as reference. When we make these models, we want them to be accurate, so when we're designing our stages in SketchUp, they're going to be accurate when we put them onto our range. So for this example, we're just going to start with a brand new file here. We have nothing in here except for our buddy Sam, or whatever his name is. Eventually you're going to want to import a lot of these models into one master file, and therefore you can have all of your props off to one side and just pull them from that repository as you need them. So for our reference, we're going to come up here to File, Import. So if we just come over and change this to All Supported Image Files, we're going to select Dimensions and Import. So now it'll show us a picture of our picture, and we're just going to find a reference. I always like to use our zero axis point here. So we're going to click once with our left mouse button, and then it's going to allow us to scale this up. For this example, we'll just set it to somewhere around there. Doesn't really matter. But we're going to want to change the orientation of this. So just for a quick reminder, if you use your middle mouse button and hold that button down, we're going to get our orbit. If you hold the Shift key and the middle mouse button, this gives us our pan. And scrolling our wheel mouse in and out will give us our zoom. So between those three functions, we should be able to maneuver around here pretty well. So I'm just going to move this out of the way, use the M key for move. I'm going to pick a corner here. I'm looking for that spot that turns into a circle. That means I'm in a corner. Okay, and then I'm just going to drag I've left clicked and let go of the mouse button, so now I'm just letting the mouse move away in the direction that I want to go. And you notice that as I'm moving around, we're getting that green snap. That means that we're sitting on our green axis, which is good. I'll bring it out to there somewhere. We'll left click again, and that sets it down. And now we're going to stand this up, so it looks basically like we're working off of a drawing on the wall. So I'm going to use the Q key, which is for rotate. I don't know how they got Q out of rotate. So now if we come over to that same corner, because we're literally going to want to stand this up, you notice in here we're always getting just the blue protractor here. So if I try to rotate, I'm just going to get it to spin around on this axis, which is not what we want. If we hover around that same corner and we use those cursor keys, if we use either the left, the right, or the up, we're going to get our three axes. So we want to be rotating this along our red axis. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hit the right cursor key, and that will lock this in the red axis. So now anytime I want to move this, it will stay locked there. I'll left click once to select that corner, and now it's going to ask me what is my starting angle that I want to use. And I'm going to use this line here as my starting angle. I'm going to click right around the protractor edge, sorry, and I'll left click once, and I'm just going to rotate this around so that it's standing straight up. If I move my mouse outside of that protractor, I'm going to get a much, basically it doesn't snap to angles. So this is an infinitely adjustable angle. And if we look down in the bottom corner here, if you look where it says angle, this is a dynamic box that depending on what it is that you're doing at the time, it will list, like if that's a dimension, or in this case it's an angle. So we're going to come over and snap that to 90 degrees, left click again to put it down. So there we go. Now we got a nice little drawing on the wall. Next thing we're going to do is we always want to be working off of a surface. This basically, Fred here, Sam, but now he's Fred, he is standing in space. He's not technically standing on a floor, he just happened to be standing at the 0 point. If we're trying to work around this area, it's pretty difficult sometimes if you don't have something flat to work off of. So we're going to create a floor for our work surface. So I'm going to click the R button for rectangle, and all of these buttons are up here in the toolbar, but it's really handy to get used to the keyboard shortcuts. So we've got our rectangle selected. We'll start at our origin again, left click once, and we'll just drag it out here somewhere, doesn't matter. And let's just actually index to that drawing there. Okay, so now we have a paper thin wall. If we look on the edge of here, it basically has no thickness to it. That in itself can sometimes cause problems. So because I want to continue to use the origin for referencing, we're going to use the push-pull command, which is P. So if I press the P key and I select the top surface of this rectangle, it will allow me to build this wall up. But therefore, if we exaggerate a little bit, if I move this up here, I can't use my origin point anymore because my floor is sitting way up here. So Control Z will undo that. Instead, what we're going to do, we're going to come from underneath. I'm going to do the same push-pull, so P. We're going to press the left mouse button once, and we're going to drag down. It doesn't really matter how much, but one of the things we're going to get used to is also in this bottom corner, we can use this for entering data. So let's just say we want to make it 1 inch. And even though we're Canadian and we're a metric system, still do my dimensions in inches. I apologize. So we're going to make this 1 inch and hit enter, and it will automatically snap. And now if we come over to this corner here, we can see we can use two things here to find out if that's truly 1 inch. We can use the T for tape measure. We can left click on one point and left click on another point, and it'll tell us in the bottom corner that it's 1 inch. Or we could use the D key for dimension. You can do that. It will also tell you that it's 1 inch. Okay. I'm going to hit escape because we don't want a dimension on that right now. There's a number of different ways that we can go about building this wall. We'll show you two ways, and I'll show you the first way as reference, but it's going to cause you a lot of problems in the long run. So we're going to create this wall section right here, and we're going to build off of that. So first thing we would need to do is we need to define the size of our wood piece. And I'm going to use the R key for rectangle, and I'm going to draw a rectangle, but I'm not going to click the left mouse button again quite yet. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start typing. I'm going to type 2 and then the inches mark, which is quotations, and then comma, 2, and then the quotations again. So what this does in the bottom left corner there, it will say 2, and then the quotes is the unit of measurement that you want to use. In this particular case, the Sketchup project that we're in right now is actually set to inches, but I'll show you how to change that in a second. But let's say I wanted to make this 2 meters by 2 meters. I can type 2m, comma 2m, and it would give me a 2 meter by 2 meter rectangle when I hit enter. So we'll hit Control Z and create another rectangle. I can make this 2 feet by using just a single apostrophe. 2 apostrophe and then comma 2 apostrophe, and the comma just separates your length and your width dimensions. So this will give us a 2 foot by 2 foot box. We'll hit Control Z again. In this case, we wanted 2 inches, comma 2 inches. And there's our tiny little box there. So now what we have is the base of this one piece of wood. So we're going to use our push-pull tool. And oh, one thing I forgot to do, I'm going to delete this. Sometimes you can have issues where these two, the floor and the object that you're working on, will merge with each other, and you can end up with some very, very undesired results. So what we're going to do, if we left click once, whoops, if we left click once, we can see in here that we have selected just the top surface. See how it changes that color. If we double click on a surface, it will click the surface and any edge that is attached to that surface. If I triple click, 1, 2, 3, it will select everything that is directly attached to that object. Notice Sam here does not get selected because he's technically not part of this object. And same with this wall. This is not part of the object either. And what we're going to do, now that we have our floor selected, is we're going to right click and we're going to go make group. You could make this a component, and components and groups are kind of the same, but not really. I suggest you do a Google search. There's people that have explained it better than I probably would. But in this case, we're just going to make this a group. So now, if I just come back down again, if I left click once, it selects this entire thing because it is now considered a group or a single object. If you're used to moving around making stages with objects, you'll notice the same thing. When you select an object, you just have to click on it once. So now we're going to go back and create that rectangle, 2 inches, comma 2 inches, enter, 2 inches. Oh, my keyboard's not working. So here's our 2-inch piece. Now we want to make this 80 inches high. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. I'll show you one way first. We'll type L for line, and I'll just go in this back corner here, and I'll just draw a line straight up. Notice it's on the blue axis. I could do it on the green axis or the red just by moving my mouse around. I want this to be on the blue. I'm going to type 80 in the quotations again for inches. You see in the bottom left, we've defined it as a length of 80 inches. We hit enter and escape to get rid of this other little bit of a line. So now you can see we've got a line that's 80 inches long. So now we can take our P for push and left click on our rectangle down here, and as we start to move up, we can literally just move our cursor over to where that, I might have to change my angle here a bit, move our mouse to the end of that line, and you see how it snaps there? So that'll tell me that that's 80 inches long, because that's how I made that line is 80 inches long. But an easier way to do this, or a faster way to do it, is just type that number in directly. So we're going back to our push-pull, and we're just going to type our 80 quotes for inches in the bottom, and then see in the bottom left-hand corner, it tells us that it's 80 inches long. So super easy. But we're still left with an object that if I was to click on M for move, if I click this one corner here, we'll just end up stretching this like it was made out of putty or something. So we still don't have a proper object that we can work with. So what we can do again is triple click, 1, 2, 3, and you want to make sure that all of your surfaces turn blue. 1, 2, 3. I don't know why this is not. It's because I'm recording, that's why. 1, 2, 3. I just hit the spacebar to get rid of whatever mode I happen to be in. So now that everything's selected here, make sure that none of the ground or anything else is selected. I'm going to right click and make group. There. So now if I hit M for move, if I try to move this one corner, it picks up the whole thing as an object. Okay, so that's one way to do this. Now, that's the right way to make your pieces, but now we're going to do, which is a way to continue making this, but it's not the right way to make it. So we're going to make this piece coming out here. And you can see in our example, it's 8 inches from the bottom, and it is a total of 92.5 inches long. So if we were to make a rectangle, I'm going to just hit R for rectangle, and then left click on this edge, and just randomly, well, I can do this at 2 inches, comma 2 inches. And that'll give me a nice rectangle on this edge. Now I can go L for line, and I'm going to left click this bottom corner, and I'm going to move up this wall here, and I'm going to go 8 inches, enter. You can see there's my 8-inch mark. It's spacebar to clear my selection. Left drag a window around here so that I can select this rectangle, and then M for move. And I'll just drag this down until it snaps to that corner right there. And once again, if I just move this down, see how it turns into a green circle right there? That tells me that that's on, there's my 8-inch line. This is one of the problems we're going to run into. Now it's sticking to that line. But now I can take this and go P for push-pull, and this was 92.5, I believe that dimension was. So 92.5 quotes for inches, and that's my 92.5 inch piece. So that works. There's nothing wrong with that. And just to make things work properly, we'll triple click on this again, turn this into a group. Oh, but now it's selected that line. So we'll triple click again, and you see how there's a tiny little blue showing there. So we're going to left click and click on that line, which is going to deselect it. Right click, make group. Okay, so that's all fine and dandy. We should be able to move this around. Okay, but how do we make our other piece here? So I'll show you a little bit of an easier way to make this. I'm going to start right from the beginning. We know we need an 80-inch piece, a 92, we're going to use multiples of, but as far as different pieces go, we need an 80-inch piece, a 92.5-inch piece, and a 61-inch piece. And I happen to know that this version of this drawing, this math does not work out, but we'll work with it anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a rectangle, R, make a circle, the squarest circle you can make, 2 inches, comma 2 inches, and hit enter. And we're going to do it again because it didn't want to take it the first time. I have no idea why this is doing this. Oh yeah, it's because I'm recording. 2 inches, comma 2 inches. Enter. There we go. Now, this is going to be the base for our 80-inch piece. I'm going to make 2 more copies, one for my 61-inch piece and one for my 92.5-inch piece. So I'm going to hit spacebar to clear this selection. I'm going to left click a box around this square, and I'm going to hit M for move. And you notice I have not made this into a group yet. We kind of did that on purpose. So left click, M for move, and I'm going to move this over. Remember, if we hit Control, it will create a copy. If I hit Control again, it'll make this, instead of making a copy, it'll just move it. So I'm going to hit the Control key once more, or again, and that's going to give me a copy. I'm just going to move it along this the red axis, and I'll click it somewhere, doesn't matter where. I'm going to left click once. Now here's a cool trick. If I hit the X key, and however many versions of this I want, I'm going to go 8, and then hit enter. It's going to create 8 copies of what I just moved. So Control Z to show you again. Select this, hit M for move. I'm going to start to move this, press the control key. You can press control before or after you're moving, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to shift this over a distance and hit my left mouse button to put it down. And when it's put down, before I click on anything else, I'm going to type X2 and it'll make 2 copies. Keeping in mind that that first piece that you put down is one of the copies. So now I have 3 pieces. This is going to be my 80-inch piece, this will be my 92.5-inch piece, and this will be my 61-inch piece. So now I can go spacebar to clear, P for push-pull, click on this first one, type in 80 inches. I got my 80-inch piece. I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to make this 92.5 inches. And I'm going to click on this one, which is my 61-inch piece. Boom. Now, I still have to make each one of these a group. So triple click, right click, make group. Triple click, right click, make group. And same for this one, make group. So now I'll move these around just to make sure that they are behaving properly. Good. Okay. So now we're going to do the same thing where we need to be 8 inches up here and 8 inches up here. This dimension is critical for our, well, critical, it's important for our walls because our wall stands have an 8-inch tube that these sit into. So if I make this too short or too long, it won't fit into the wall properly. We're going to come down here to our 80-inch piece. I'm going to draw L for line, and I'm going to draw up on this edge, if you remember that 8 inches. Okay, so now it's created a little line there. Hit escape to just clear that selection. And now we're going to take our 92, and actually, you know what, while we're here, let's draw another line here at 8 inches down. Okay, so now we have our 2 reference points. So now we will take this piece. We need to rotate it first because this is our horizontal piece. So we're going to come down to this corner, Q for rotate, and make sure that it's sitting on my, remember we're rotating this on the green axis. So I want to make sure this protractor stays green. And if you just move your mouse slightly around, you can sometimes get it to turn green if you need it to. An easier way is just to hit the left arrow key and that locks it green so you know that it's going to go in the right direction. Okay, so now it's going to ask me where's my pivot point. It'll be here, I'll left click once. Second time it's going to say what's my starting angle. So I'm going to click down on this edge here. I could put it on here. Sure, let's put it here. So I'm going to left click on this axis and then I'm going to come down till I either see in the bottom corner here 90 degrees, or I can just stay inside of the protractor and it'll snap in 15-degree increments. Okay, so left click again to set it down. I'm just going to move this guy back a bit. Okay, so now we can hit the M key. Sorry, we need to left click or space bar and then left click to select the piece, and then M to move. And I'm going to pick this bottom corner here. Now in previous videos I said make sure that you stay on your axis to make sure that you don't lose yourself in space. But you can actually, if I hit escape there, if you pick a specific point, so I'm going to pick this bottom left corner of our piece of wood here, and I can see that, you can see, doesn't matter how much I zoom in, there's my 8-inch line there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this point, I'm going to bring it right over until it snaps onto that green dot there, and then I know that that is sitting at 8 inches. Okay, and it's also properly aligned in all of the axes, so we're good in that respect. Now I'm just going to take this piece, I'm going to go, now I'm going to want this top edge to line up with our 8-inch top piece. Okay, so I'm going to, because I still have it selected, I'm just going to hit the M key to move. I'm going to pick this top corner this time. Now I'm going to move this piece up. Remember, if I hit the Control key, it'll leave that one piece there as a copy. Okay, so I'm using a combination of my middle mouse button and the Shift key to get my angle correctly. And make sure that snaps up on the green line. And now we have our top piece. Now we can take this piece here, M to move, and I'm going to move so that this edge here is lined up with this edge of our horizontal pieces. So if I'm holding the Control key right now, so if I left click, there's my copy. And now I want to come down and I want to move this so that it's lined up with here. But if I just put this edge here, it's going to line that corner up with this piece, and we want it to line up with this. So we're going to hold our Shift key. Once we have this piece moving along the red axis, that tells us that it's parallel with this. I'm going to hold the Shift key down. You see how that red line turns bold? That means it's temporarily locked in that axis. So now it doesn't matter where I move my mouse, it'll go kind of weird, but it'll stay in line with that piece. So now when I come over and move to this, the edge of this horizontal piece, it'll snap. So now I know that this is exactly in line with here, and I know it's lined up exactly with this piece here. It's super easy in that respect. So now we've got our outside of our wall. Now we need to put in our middle piece. This particular wall is a ported wall, so there's going to be a fence mesh in here and a fence mesh here, and this is going to be an open space in the middle. So that's the reason why this wall, this is a second iteration of the wall, where I had the first one where the port was exactly centered. But I made this version because it allows a little bit more flexibility. If you had another wall that was, say, going downrange and this wall was centered with that, it gives you kind of options for keeping it on the left side or the right side of that other wall. Just something different. So same thing, we're going to use our 32-inch measurement, and I'm going to make sure that I pick the inside edge of this upright. So I'm going to use my line tool, and I'm going to draw a line. Let's pick the front edge. It would be easier. This is going to be 32 inches. There's our green dot. Then we might as well get our 45.5 inch piece here, or measurement, sorry. 45.5 inches. Okay, so there's our two outside edges. And now I can just take this piece, M to move, and just drop right up on that edge. And then pick this edge, move it, creating a copy, and snap it to there, and we're done. Just to make sure, because per IPSC rules, this gap here needs to be a minimum of 12 inches. So let's take our tape measure tool and verify. What does that say? It's 11 inches. Okay, so my measurements are right out to lunch. But I'm pretty sure if I just hover, I'm going to pick the line tool again. If I just hover along this line, it'll snap to the center of this, whatever line that you're hovering over, it'll find the center of that just by hovering over it. It says midpoint and group. Okay, so I know that this piece here is in my center, and if what I was just rambling on about is true, where I wanted this in the center, that means that this needs to be offset by 12 inches. So let's go L, come over here, 12 inches, and I must have done that center to center. That's interesting. That's okay. We'll take this, move, and we'll just zip this piece over till it snaps with that green line, which should be our end point of our 12-inch piece. Excuse me, and take our T for tape measure, Measure this again, and now we're sitting at 13 inches. What the heck's going on here? M, move, not that piece, this. T, tape measure, 12 inches, there we go. And we are going to get rid of those lines shortly. So this is a problem I found earlier where, for whatever reason, these pieces are a little bit too short. Like I said, I know this drawing has gone through some iterations. So what we're going to do is we're going to shorten these pieces of wood. So I know that these pieces are too long per our drawing. This drawing has gone through some iterations. So what we're going to do is shorten these pieces. Up until this point, we've been using a rather opaque texture or view, I guess, for our materials here. We're going to want to use the scale tool. So if I left click on this piece, and we want to scale in one dimension only, but if I press the S key for scale, there's hidden boxes in here, and I want to make sure that I get the correct one, because if you scale on the wrong, if I click this box for instance, it scales it in all dimensions. So not only is it getting shorter, but it's getting narrower and thinner. Basically, we're turning it into a toothpick. I hit escape. If you come up here to view, toolbars, and make sure that you're on the normally it's sitting here on options, but if you click on the toolbars tab, if you scroll down a little bit to the styles and turn styles on if it's not already turned on, it's going to give you these options in the top left here. So right now we're currently sitting on shaded. If we move over here to wireframe, it'll allow us to see through our materials. This isn't really, the shaded view is a lot easier to work with in general, but for this particular exercise, because we're trying to see inside or through an object, this is quite handy. So in scale, if we click on any of these boxes here, so if I click on, say, this box, it will make the piece thinner only in that direction. So it's basically flattening the whole piece. We'll hit escape. If I pick a corner, it's going to scale in multiple directions at once. If I come up to the top, if I pick just this top edge, it will only make this piece shorter while keeping the rest of the dimensions the same. So what I'm going to do is hit escape. So we're going to zoom out, hit our S key again, and then we're going to pick this middle box here, which is going to make this piece shorter. I'm going to come over to this corner of our horizontal piece, which will bring the overall length down to that point there. Okay, so then we're going to left click, select this object. Might have to pick the edge itself. S to scale, pick the middle piece, and now I can use this same piece here, this corner, or we can go back to here, either one, and left click again. And that should make our pieces the same height as our horizontals. I'm going to come back to shaded view, just because I find it easier to work in. And now we have our pieces lining up properly. And even if this isn't necessarily a good exercise of how accurate this drawing is, it does show you some good techniques on how to manipulate your model. Okay, so now that we've built our wall to the drawing, we don't really need this drawing anymore. So I'm just going to delete it because we're going to want to be able to see through it. So yes, it's a wall, but it doesn't really look like a wall. So we're going to turn it into a wall. But before we do that, if I try to move this, it's just going to move the individual pieces. So we're going to turn this into a group, but for a group, we want just the wooden pieces. We don't necessarily want those little reference lines that we were doing. So we're going to hit the space bar, and left click on the objects themselves, holding the control key to select multiple items. And here you can see I selected that line because the rest of this piece is still black. So I'm going to left click on that again, and I'll left click down here somewhere. There we go. I'm going to use the M key for move. I'm going to pick this corner here and just move it back a little bit. Okay, now I can see those black lines, and I'll just highlight those and delete. So now we're left with our frame. So I'll left click and make sure I select everything here, not including the floor obviously, and we're going to right click on the object and go make group. There, so now we get a bounding box around the entire object. So now when I select that, the wall as a whole. Okay, so now we want to make this look like a wall. In the tools, not the tools, in the window and trays, if we go manage trays, all these things in the right hand column are our trays. That's hard to say. I've got a custom one here that I've specifically selected certain things. The ones you're looking for in this case is materials. So make sure that your materials is checked and then hit close. So inner materials, now it's moved it down to the bottom. Over here to this section here, it says colors. And we could scroll inside of this window here. It'll give us a rainbow of colors. You can edit those colors if you want. What we want to do is we want to click on the drop down box, get out of colors, and you can see we have all these options for, they're basically textures. They have the brick. Here, let's do this actually. Let's delete these, and let's if we want to work on the individual pieces of this wall. Let's say I'm not making a port wall and I want to make just a regular wall. If we double click on the object, it turns into like an X-ray view, and now we're actually inside of that group. I'm going to hit escape to get out of that. Another way you can do this, if you want to do a lot of work, is if you right click on the model, you can hit explode. And what that does is it deletes the group bounding box. So now these are just individual pieces again. So if you wanted to make this just a single wall, that's the rectangle outside, you can edit it through here and it'll stay. You can come back in here and make it another group again. Let's turn this into something that resembles wood. So if we look down at the bottom of the materials, there's an actual wood section. And there's not a very big selection of wood, which is kind of depressing. And many of these pieces are designed more along like hardwood floors. I found this cork actually is somewhat represents what we're trying to do. So you left click once and you see a little paint bucket. So now anything that you click on, and because these are already groups, it will paint the entire group. But let's say for instance that you wanted to paint only this top surface for whatever. You want to make it I don't know, stone. Okay, so what we can do is spacebar to get out of that. If we double click on here, we've now gone into the group of this particular object. And so now if I zoom in a little bit, just to make it a little easier, I can now click and paint just that one surface. And if I hit escape a couple of times, now that model is now set with just that face being a different texture. So I'll just hit Control Z a couple of times to change that back. Okay, so now we have a wood frame. So let's go back and deal with what we want to put in the middle here. So we're going to go back and we're going to create our rectangles again. And we're going to come over here to landscaping. And in here, there is this construction fence. And if we click on that, we're going to paint this as a construction fence. But watch what happens. Let's put George behind here. Okay, so right now we can't see George, but if I paint this that landscape fabric, all of a sudden we can see through him. So this is an excellent way. Get back here, Fred. This is an excellent way for making walls, because we can still see through him on both ways. And this is a really good low texture model, the texture. So it doesn't take a lot of processing power. So now that we have that, we still have to make sure if I move this, we're still not grouped together here. So we want to highlight everything and make this into a group again. There. So now we have a textured ported wall all ready to go. There's no limit to how many groups you can make. So I could make this wall a group, and then I could hold down the shift key and add this wall, and I can make this a group, and then it's still Chuck there still isn't in the group, so I can hold the shift key and select him and make another group. So now everybody's in the group. So there's no limit to how many groups that you want to make. And if you see a model, let's say you've got a swinger. There's a swinger model. Let's find a swinger. If you have the 3D warehouse selected, which is actually up here in your window, manage trays. In your trays here, if you pick components, that'll give you this searchable window here. And we can just type swinger. I don't know what'll come up. Might have to put IPSC swinger. There you go, here's a double swinger. Classic swinger, that's what I'm looking for. So if you left click on that once, that's how I quote unquote made some of my other models in here. But let's say for instance I wanted to make this a target with a penalty on it. So right now this is a model, a group unto itself. I'm going to explode this, explode this, just to get rid of all those bounding boxes. So now if I wanted to make some edit of this, I can right click and hit explode. And now if I click out of here, I can now click the individual. Well, that's still considered part of the model. So the target here is, get rid of this. The target is its own part. So they've made the swinger a model, group, sorry, and then they've made a target, a group that can go into that group. So that's quite handy. If we go M and move, and let's make this a double. If you're working on this, you see how now, because these are just lines on the paper of the target, we can still see both targets, but in real life we would have one target physically on top of another. So if you come in here, left click to select the bottom target, pick this corner by hitting the M key, and move it out on the green axis. Hold your shift key and pick so you selected the back edge of the lower target, and we're going to select the front edge of the top target. And what that does is it actually puts the bottom target physically on top of the top target, and now it actually looks proper. So this is after, and if I hit Control Z, that was before. So simple little thing, but makes a big difference in your clarity and aesthetics. So I hope that helps. Making props, the process that we went through for building things is really easy, especially if you're doing square objects like this. What I've done for barrels, C for circle, and I just made a barrel. I don't know what the dimension is. We'll call it 24 inches. And then what you do is you select the center piece here and hit the delete key. So now you're just left with a circle. And then if you select that circle, hit the M key, and I'm going to find the center of that. That's a big circle. Okay, so now I've got the circle selected. I'm going to hit the control key to make a copy. I'm going to hit the up arrow to move it in its horizontal direction, vertical direction, the up direction, whatever it happens to be. And I'm going to set this at, I don't know, I think it's 36 inches. I think that's the size of a barrel. Oh, it's too small. No, maybe so. And this is way too big, but so be it. Let's scale it. Hit spacebar, select that other circle. S for scale. Well, this time I want to scale them. I want it to stay at 36 inches, but I want to scale the relative diameter of the circle. So I'm going to pick one of these corners, and you can play around. Like you can see, oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do this. You know, so you can play around with it till you figure out what effect that you're going for. And if this is 24 inches, if I was to scale this down 50%, so 0.50 comma 0.50, now this should in theory be 12 inches by 12 inches, like a perfect circle that is, as opposed to an oval. Okay, so now I've ended up with a top and a bottom of a barrel. So I'm going to select this again, hit M for move. I'm going to move this up again, but now I only want this to come up 18 inches, half of 36. Okay, so now you're left with 3 rings. If I create a line and go right from this bottom, believe it or not, this is actually a series of lines, not a perfect circle. So if I hover over this one and see how it shows there's the blue dot in the center, so that tells me that I'm lined up with the center, or on a 15-degree angle. If I left click on here and come up to this top circle, okay, so now I've got a line that joins them together. And do the same thing here. And you kind of get used to kind of working in 3 dimensions here. There. So now I'll make this a group. There's a barrel. It's probably not the right dimensions, but hey. And the reason why I like using this barrel rather than, oh, let's go barrel. Oops, wrong window. Okay, so let's just bring a barrel in here. Let's try this one. There we go. Okay, so here's another example. They've got 2 barrels. We only want 1 barrel. So left click on it, right click, hit explode, spacebar to clear your selection, and they had more than 1 group. Good grief, they got a lot of groups here. Okay, so let's delete this barrel. Now, this barrel probably has a ton of edges and the textures and such. So with 1 barrel, it's not a big deal, but when your stage has 10, 15 barrels in it, and you've got 6 stages on this SketchUp area, when you start looking down on angles and it has to render all of those barrels, it will eat up your CPU speed a lot. So I recommend, if you can, And also it's hard when you're trying to, let's say for instance I had this barrel, it's probably not on the floor, but it's really hard to, especially if this is like a double barrel, up there somewhere. It sometimes this is good for trying to plan out what you can see and what you can't see, but you can accomplish the same thing with this barrel. And it's much easier to, like you can see here, this edge, I know that I can no longer see the swinger in behind. Here I can see 50% of the A zone because I can see the edge of this barrel here. Yet it's easy to see what's going on your stage, as well as I can make 8,000 copies of this. Do you remember how to do that? Move and left click because it will copy this. You remember what the key was to make copies? Look in the bottom corner here, X, 8, or whatever, how many copies. Oop, there you go. So this doesn't take any processing power on your computer. They're just lines. So personal preference, but I think getting used to using barrels like this is very easy to see what's going on. And with your see-through walls, you should be good to go. I hope this helps. If you have any other questions or things you want